Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, right? Like engineering.
Right, like it's an exact science.
Exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is.
It's totally binary. It's either broken or it's not broken.
Yeah, it's clean. And I mean, it's comforting because we like things to be visible. We like them to be categorized.
I want the clear answer.
Right. But what happens when the person holding that x-ray machine realizes that the entire hospital system around them is just fundamentally fractured?
Oh, wow.
Like,
Yeah.
what happens when pointing out the break actually makes you the enemy? Today, we are diving into a massive and honestly a pretty harrowing stack of medical records, ethical manuals, parliamentary evidence, and whistleblower testimonies.
It's a lot to get through.
It is. But we're using all of this to uncover what is basically a silent crisis in modern medicine.
Yeah, we were really looking at the hijacking of the sacred doctor-patient relationship here. I mean, something that has been the absolute cornerstone of healing since Hippocrates is just being completely dismantled.
Just taken apart piece by piece.
Exactly. It's being replaced by bureaucratic systems and what our source materials refer to as cookbook medicine.
Cookbook medicine. And most chillingly, we are going to explore the terrifying retaliation faced by medical professionals who, actually dare to speak out to protect you. The patients sitting in the waiting room.
Right. The people who actually try to do the right thing.
Yeah. And to anchor this whole deep dive, we are following the story of one specific physician, Dr. Hadi Ali Matava Srivatsa.
His story is just, it's unbelievable.
It reads like a paranoid medical thriller, but the stakes are entirely real. I mean, here is a doctor who documented 70 severe medical errors caused by an experimental nurse-led clinic system in the UK.
70 cases. That's not a small sample size.
No, not at all. He saw what was happening, he blew the whistle, and the system's response wasn't to, fix the problem.
Of course not.
Right. It was to initiate a devastating years-long campaign to just completely destroy him.
And Dr. Srivatsa's story isn't an isolated incident either. That's the scary part. It is a very loud, very distressing symptom of a much larger systemic shift.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
To truly understand why a hospital system would ruthlessly attack its own whistleblower, we first have to understand how the culture of medicine itself has fundamentally changed over the last few decades.
Right. We have to look at the death of clinical judgment.
Exactly. There's a fascinating paper in our sources by clinical endocrinologist Dr. Dalinar, and he argues about this shift toward cookbook medicine.
Oh, the SAT analogy, right? I love that part.
Yes. He uses this brilliant analogy, saying that modern medicine is increasingly being treated like an SAT exam.
So think about the mechanics of an SAT exam. There's one predetermined right answer chosen by a central authority.
Right.
And every other answer, no matter how nuanced or thoughtful, is just wrong.
Completely wrong. And Dr. Dalinar is warning us that when government-prescribed guidelines strictly dictate care, doctors are basically forced to focus on specific tasks linked to financial rewards or, compliance metrics.
So they aren't diagnosing anymore?
No, they are no longer using their clinical judgment at all. They are literally just checking boxes on a digital tablet.
Okay, wait. I have to stop you there for a second because I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone listening right now, and I'm thinking, well, we want evidence-based medicine, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Because don't guidelines prevent rogue doctors from just guessing or using some outdated remedy from the 1970s? Like, why is standardizing care suddenly a bad thing?
Well, guidelines as a baseline are absolutely essential. I mean, they establish a floor for safety.
Okay.
The danger really arises when guidelines stop being a tool for the doctor and become an unyielding mandate over the doctor.
I see.
Because human beings are not standardized widgets on an assembly line.
Yeah.
A rigid protocol might dictate treat symptom X with medication Y.
Right. Just plug and play.
But what if that specific patient has a unique comorbidity, like a rare kidney issue, that makes medication Y toxic?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Or what if their personal values or religious beliefs conflict with that standard treatment? When strict compliance is demanded above all else, doctors lose the flexibility to be innovative and discerning.
They just become robots.
Basically. The system replaces a highly trained diagnostician, someone skilled in combining decades of experience with, subtle physical cues, with a practitioner of automatic prescribed behaviors.
And this leads directly to what the sources call defensive medicine.
Yes, defensive medicine.
That's where you're ordering a massive battery of tests, right?
Yeah.
Like CT scans, blood panels, MRIs, not because you genuinely think the patient needs them,
No.
but because you are just terrified of being sued or disciplined by the administration if you happen to miss a 1 in a million edge case.
Exactly that. And this ties into a massive historical shift highlighted in the medical ethics manuals we're looking at for this deep dive.
The shift away from paternalism.
Right. Historically, medicine operated under something called medical paternalism. The doctor was the ultimate, unquestioned authority.
The doctor spoke and the patient simply followed orders, no questions asked.
Right. And society no longer accepts that model, which, is a good thing. We highly value patient autonomy today.
Sure.
But the pendulum has swung so far to the other side that healthcare is increasingly viewed as a retail transaction.
The patient as client paradox. There's a real-world scenario outlined in the documents that perfectly captures this, and it's just wild.
The prescription scenario.
Yeah. So a drug abuser comes into a clinic and aggressively demands a specific, highly addictive prescription. Now, under the traditional ethical duty of do no harm, the doctor is legally and morally obligated to say no.
They have to say no.
But in this new retail model, the dynamic is totally warped.
Because if the patient is redefined as a client, the implicit rule is that the customer is always right.
Exactly. So refusing that harmful prescription often means the patient will immediately file a formal complaint stating the doctor was rude, dismissive, or abusive.
And the bureaucratic hospital system tracks patient satisfaction scores, almost like a hotel tracks Yelp reviews.
Which is terrifying.
It is. Because if a doctor's scores drop, they are penalized. They might lose bonuses or face disciplinary hearings. So the system structurally incentivizes satisfying a patient's immediate, sometimes harmful demand over protecting their long-term health.
So the doctor is caught in this impossible trap. You either follow your ethical oath and get punished by the Human Resources Department, or you follow the administrative protocol, keep your scores up, and potentially harm the patient.
It's a lose-lose situation.
Which brings us directly to the nightmare Dr. Srivatsa documented, because he was working in a system where this cookbook approach was taken to its absolute extreme.
Yeah, between 2003 and 2006, Dr. Srivatsa was working in what was called a pilot nurse-led practice.
And the administrative idea here was pure efficiency, right?
Purely. Save money and process more bodies by having nurses, rather than doctors, handle emergency calls, walk-in clinics, and initial diagnoses.
And these nurses were armed with these rigid protocols, decision trees on a computer. If the patient says their stomach hurts, click this box, prescribe that pill.
Just following the flowchart.
But Dr. Srivatsa noticed things were going horribly, tragically wrong. So he started keeping a quiet record, documenting the cases where this automated system failed.
He collected 70 specific cases of severe medical errors.
And reading through these clinical case files in the sources, it is genuinely visceral. It is hard to stomach some of these.
It really is. Let's break down the clinical stakes of what happens when the human element is removed from diagnosis. Take the case of the 12-year-old girl.
Oh, man. Right. So a 12-year-old girl comes into the clinic presenting with a prolonged history of tiredness. Her blood test shows low hemoglobin.
And the protocol pathway for that is incredibly simple.
Right. Low hemoglobin equals anemia. Anemia equals iron tablets. So the nurses put her on iron tablets.
And they kept her on those iron tablets for 2 full years.
2 years. And she wasn't getting any better. But because everyone was just following the SAT exam checklist, symptom, protocol, treatment, no one stopped to ask why a 12-year-old girl was profoundly anemic and failing to respond to treatment.
Because asking why requires stepping off the protocol path.
Yeah.
It requires clinical curiosity, and crucially, it requires a comprehensive physical examination.
Right.
A doctor looking at a pediatric patient who is failing to thrive doesn't just keep writing prescriptions. They put their hands on the patient. They palpate the abdomen.
But for 2 years, this young girl was treated via algorithm without a proper physical exam.
Unbelievable.
Finally, at age 14, she developed acute abdominal pain, and Dr. Srivatsa saw her. He immediately went through her notes, realized the protocol had failed her completely, and actually examined her body.
And what he found was awful.
He found a massive, palpable mass in her abdomen. It turned out to be an advanced tumor on her kidney.
And by the time Dr. Srivatsa caught it, the damage was catastrophic. She lost the kidney. She is now on medication for high blood pressure for the rest of her life.
And the girl's father asked Srivatsa point blank, why didn't the other doctors and nurses examine her?
What do you even say to that?
Well, Srivatsa wrote that he was so ashamed of the system he couldn't even answer the question. It's just devastating.
And the tragedy here is that this wasn't an anomaly. The failure to look past the presenting symptom, the failure to actually look at the patient, is a recurring theme in all 70 cases.
Let's talk about the 23-year-old medical student.
Oh, yes. So she came into the clinic highly anxious, physically shaking, and speaking with a notably husky, deepened voice. She also mentioned she was worried about spots on her face.
And she had been seen multiple times by nurses and even other doctors in that surgery, always fully clothed.
Always.
They looked at her checklist of symptoms. Husky voice. So what does the protocol dictate for a husky voice? They referred her to a speech therapist.
A speech therapist for a systemic medical issue. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
But when Dr. Srivatsa sees her, his clinical training kicks in immediately. He hears the deepened voice, he sees the physical tremors, he notes the anxiety.
He isn't thinking about vocal cords. He is thinking about the endocrine system.
Exactly. He suspects a severe hormonal imbalance, potentially an adrenal or ovarian issue. So, ensuring her mother is present in the room as a chaperone, he asks the patient to undress so he can conduct a proper examination of her chest and torso.
And what he finds is severe hirsutism.
And for those who might not know, hirsutism is excessive, coarse hair growth in women, typically in a male-like pattern.
Yes, excessive hair on her chest, cheeks, and legs, which she had been desperately trying to shave and hide.
Right.
This is an absolutely massive red flag for a systemic endocrine disorder, not a speech pathology issue. He immediately bypassed the protocol and referred her to an endocrinologist.
He caught a potentially debilitating hormonal issue that the checklist completely missed.
But here is where the story twists, and it highlights just how broken the culture had become. How is Dr. Srivatsa rewarded for stepping outside the box and making the correct, potentially life-altering diagnosis?
Oh, this makes me so mad. The patient actually files a complaint against him.
Yep.
She says she felt uncomfortable being asked to remove her blouse because all the other nurses and doctors had just examined her with her clothes on.
The baseline standard of care at that clinic had dropped so abysmally low that a thorough, medically necessary physical examination felt like an inappropriate violation to the patient.
It's backwards.
And to compound the absurdity, when Dr. Srivatsa was later subjected to an investigation over this specific complaint, he noted that the investigating nurse looking into his conduct didn't even know what the word hirsutism meant.
Wait, seriously?
Yes. The administrative person assigned to judge his clinical competency lacked the basic foundational medical vocabulary to even understand the diagnosis he made.
It's staggering. A system judging a doctor without knowing the medicine. And the case files just keep going.
There are so many.
There's a 55-year-old lady who was diagnosed with gastritis by a nurse and a doctor. Gastritis is an inflammation of the stomach lining. They gave her anti-sickness pills. Why? Because she presented with tummy pain and vomiting. It's the classic checklist match.
But when Dr. Srivatsa finally sees her weeks later, he doesn't just look at the screen. He takes a detailed, chronological history.
Right.
He realizes the pain she's describing isn't in her upper stomach where gastritis occurs. It's much lower down in the pelvic region. He insists on running a pregnancy test despite her initial protests and denials.
And it comes back positive.
The patient is an older, very strict Muslim woman, and discovering an advanced pregnancy at that late stage caused her immense, profound psychological distress.
Because the clinic's failure to properly diagnose her early on completely robbed her of her medical options, her privacy, and her autonomy.
Exactly.
Then there's the 20-year-old man. He goes to the walk-in clinic and is diagnosed with shingles. The protocol is applied and he's sent home. A week later, he stumbles back into the surgery. He's incredibly unwell.
But the receptionist looks at the book and tells him there are no appointments available.
Now, under normal bureaucratic rules, that young man would have been sent away to die. Luckily, the receptionist had been trained by Dr. Srivatsa using a clinical tool he personally invented called the May I card.
The May I card was this brilliant, elegantly simple system. It used just 3 red flag symptoms to help non-medical staff, like receptionists and triage nurses, safely differentiate between minor illnesses and life-threatening conditions.
So the receptionist recognized the red flags on the Maya card, completely bypassed the appointment book, and rushed the young man directly to Dr. Srivatsa.
What did Srivatsa find? It wasn't shingles. Shingles follows a nerve path. It's very distinct.
Right.
The young man actually had a staphylococcus infection, impetigo, that had been totally missed by the initial practitioner. By the time Srivatsa saw him, the surface bacteria had entered his bloodstream. He was in septic shock. Septicemia. He had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance to save his life.
If we pull back and look at the broader mechanics here, we have to ask why this keeps happening. And the documentation is very clear about this. This is not a story about malicious or lazy nurses.
Not at all.
This is a profound structural failure. Nurses are incredible, absolutely vital healthcare professionals. But they do not undergo 5 to 7 years of grueling medical school training focused on clinical diagnosis, complex pathophysiology, and the art of differential diagnosis.
They don't. They do not have the vast foundational knowledge required to look at seemingly unrelated, disparate symptoms and connect them to a rare underlying cause.
There's a quote from Dr. Srivatsa in the documents that haunts me. He wrote, "Your eyes don't see what your mind can't think."
It is the perfect encapsulation of the problem. If your brain hasn't been extensively trained to know that a husky voice, anxiety, and facial spots might equal an endocrine tumor, your eyes are never going to look for chest hair.
You just won't see it.
If you are strictly taught to match symptom A to treatment B, you will never even conceive of option C.
And the most heartbreaking case in his files that proves this blind spot is the 12-year-old girl with bloodstains in her underwear.
Oh, this one is incredibly difficult.
It really is. A young girl, 12 years old, who hasn't even started her periods yet, is brought into the clinic. The nurse looks at the presenting symptom, which is blood, and treats her for a urine infection.
There is no physical examination, just the standard protocol for a young girl presenting with genital blood.
But her urine test came back completely normal. She had absolutely no other symptoms of a urinary tract infection. She was seen twice for the exact same problem by a nurse and then by another doctor.
Neither of them examined her.
Neither. Both of them, blinded by the protocol pathway, entirely missed the clear physical signs of sexual abuse and traumatic injury.
Your eyes don't see what your mind can't think.
The protocol for blood was urine infection. That rigid protocol literally blinded the medical professionals to the ongoing abuse of a child.
So put yourself in Dr. Srivatsa's shoes for a minute. You are sitting on this mountain of evidence, 70 cases of clear, undeniable medical negligence. You've invented the May I tool on your own time to try and stop the bleeding, literally and figuratively.
You are looking at the ethical manuals that explicitly state you have a duty to report unsafe care.
So he does exactly what society and his medical oath demand. He blows a whistle. He takes this evidence to the administration, the primary care trust, and says, we have to stop this experiment. The patients are in danger.
And how does the institutional machinery respond to a doctor fiercely upholding his Hippocratic oath?
With absolute, unyielding, systematic retaliation.
Srivatsa isn't given a medal. He isn't thanked for saving lives. Instead, he is plunged into a humiliating 4-year disciplinary inquiry. 4 years of his life, suspended in administrative limbo.
The psychological trauma inflicted on whistleblowers cannot be overstated. Srivatsa documents the horror of realizing the system wasn't just ignoring him, it was actively hunting him.
And we have the actual details from his defense file here, and I want to read through this and summarize it because it really shows you how traumatic it is to cope with these instigated false claims.
It's a character assassination.
Completely. So suddenly he's bombarded with about 20 separate formal complaints and claims. And where did these sudden complaints originate? Almost exclusively from the very nurses, administrative staff, and clinic managers whose unsafe practices he was trying to expose.
But they also used the patients against him, right?
Yes. And this is where the specific context of that clinic becomes so important. According to the source files, the majority of the patients at this clinic were of Pakistani origin, and the doctor who was there previously was also from Pakistan.
Okay.
And that previous doctor did not have an appointment system. He allowed walk-ins. But the new nurse manager came in and completely stopped the walk-ins. She forced the patients to book appointments.
Which patients usually hate.
Exactly. But here's the insidious part. The patients were made to believe that Dr. Srivatsa, who is Indian, was the one making these new rules, which he wasn't. Oh, wow. So they shifted the blame onto him.
Yes. So there was this underlying simmering anger and racial tension against the Indian doctor because they thought he took away their walking clinic. And that anger led the patients to support the nurses and to complain against him.
That is incredibly manipulative by the administration.
It gets worse. Dr. Srivatsa was actually warned about what was happening behind the scenes by a couple of friendly staff members, Hadi Ali and Sophia.
What did they tell him?
They warned him that a staff member named Frida Smithers was literally dictating the complaint letters. She was having the patients write them because the patients were not fluent in English.
Are you kidding me? So the administration is literally ghostwriting the complaints against the whistleblower using patients who don't speak fluent English.
Yes, and when the final official report was created by the investigators, it was filled with numerous factual errors. Srivatsa wrote back expressing his deep concern because the final document included complaints that weren't even related to him.
Just padding the file. Right. And even more shockingly, there were complaints that had been formally withdrawn by the people who initially made them, but the administration deliberately placed them in the final document anyway.
Why would they keep withdrawn complaints in an official disciplinary file?
Because the goal wasn't truth. The goal was to make anyone who read that document visualize Srivatsa as a sexual pervert who takes bribes and behaves inappropriately with women.
Referencing the hirsutism case.
Exactly. They twisted his meticulous clinical thoroughness into something sinister. It is character assassination via paperwork. And Srivatsa pleads in his notes, asking the reader to be thorough as a judge who will be impartial and honest because he was just drowning in these false claims.
And let's look at the actual mechanics of this retaliation, because it happens so often that there's a specific term for it, derived from another famous whistleblowers case in the UK. They call it the plausible alternative.
The plausible alternative.
Yeah, right. The plausible alternative is the cornerstone of institutional retaliation. When a hospital trust or a corporate healthcare administration realizes they need to silence a whistleblower, they have a major legal problem.
They can't just fire him for being a whistleblower.
Exactly. They know they cannot explicitly fire a doctor for whistleblowing. That violates labor laws and generates horrific public relations. So the HR and legal departments invent a plausible alternative.
They construct a completely separate, fireable offense.
Yes. They dig through the doctor's entire history, monitor their emails, or, as we just saw, solicit fake complaints.
Oh.
We see this vividly in the case of the brilliant cardiologist, Dr. Raj Mattu.
Oh, the Dr. Mattu case is infamous.
Yeah.
So Dr. Mattu blew the whistle on severe overcrowding in his hospital's wards. Patients were literally dying because of it.
And the hospital's response wasn't to add more beds. Instead, they unleashed the full weight of the institution against him.
They accused him of fraud, they accused him of sexual impropriety, they accused him of physically assaulting people.
The institutional desperation to ruin Dr. Mattu was so profound that the National Health Service Trust actually hired private investigators. They spent an estimated £6 million taxpayer money over several years just trying to dig up enough dirt to discredit and fire this one cardiologist.
£6 million. And what was the ultimate outcome after Mattu was completely cleared of all the severe allegations by the General Medical Council?
They fired him for failing to sign a retraining plan.
A minor engineered bureaucratic technicality.
But the goal was achieved. He was out, and his reputation was dragged through the mud. And Mattu is far from the only one.
Look at Dr. Chris Day. He blew the whistle on dangerously understaffed intensive care units. His employer's response was to completely remove his national training number.
And for those who don't know, a training number is basically a doctor's passport to practice and eventually become a consultant. Without it, your career is over.
Done. Look at Dr. Martin Pittman, a consultant obstetrician who raised urgent safety concerns about maternity care. The hospital spent well into 6 figures of public funds to legally oust him.
And we saw this exact same mechanism weaponized globally during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, for sure.
Doctors who held heterodox views, who dared to publicly question mainstream hospital protocols or government mandates, faced unimaginable institutional wrath. We are talking about highly credentialed physicians having their private clinics raided by law enforcement without proper warrants.
It's like something out of a dystopia.
We're seeing massive healthcare systems launching million-dollar lawsuits against their own doctors for supposedly violating non-disclosure or separation agreements merely by speaking to journalists.
We're seeing peer-reviewed, published scientific papers suddenly retracted by massive medical journals without any valid scientific justification, purely due to institutional pressure.
The pattern is undeniable and terrifying. The institution fundamentally views the whistleblower not as a protector of public safety, but as an existential financial threat to the institution itself.
You know, it's like the system operates like an autoimmune disease.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Because in a healthy body, the immune system attacks foreign invaders, like viruses or bacteria. But in an autoimmune disease, the body's defense mechanisms become confused and begin systematically destroying its own healthy, life-sustaining tissue.
Yes.
In the hospital system, the disease is the bad medical care, the dangerous protocols, the misdiagnoses. The healthy cells are the doctors trying to sound the alarm.
But instead of attacking the bad care, the institutional body unleashes its administrative defense mechanisms, HR departments, legal teams, quality assurance boards, to aggressively destroy its most vital protective cells.
Which brings us to the ultimate administrative weapon used in this autoimmune response. Because if the administration decides to invent these plausible alternatives to ruin a doctor, how do they actually execute it legally? They can't just fire a tenured physician without a process, right?
No, they need a weapon. And that weapon is the sham peer review.
Explain to me how a sham peer review actually works, because the phrase itself sounds like a massive contradiction. Peer review is supposed to be the absolute gold standard of science and medicine.
It is a profound perversion of a vital concept. In a normal, healthy clinical setting, legitimate peer review is essential. It's when your equally qualified colleagues carefully review your surgical outcomes or diagnostic history to ensure you are practicing safely and keeping your skills sharp.
It's educational. It's protective.
Exactly. A sham peer review, however, is a targeted administrative weapon. The hospital essentially sets up a kangaroo court. They go through the performative motions of providing a fair and impartial hearing for the accused physician.
They convene a committee, they present evidence, they have a stenographer.
But the outcome has been entirely predetermined by the hospital's legal and administrative executives. The physician's due process rights are completely trampled.
How so?
Well, they might be denied the right to cross-examine their accusers, or the committee might be stacked with doctors who are financially dependent on the hospital administration.
So it's rigged from the start.
Completely. And the outcome of this sham review leads to the absolute nuclear option, the NPDB, the National Practitioner Data Bank.
The documents we are looking at refer to an NPDB report as a literal death sentence for a medical career.
Because it is. The NPDB is a federal repository in the United States, established by Congress, and similar black box registries exist in healthcare systems globally. If a hospital terminates your privileges, suspends you for more than 30 days, or successfully forces you out through a sham peer review, they are federally mandated to report that action to the NPDB.
And once you're on that list,
Once your name has a negative report in that databank, you are essentially professionally radioactive. No other hospital in the country will hire you. Your malpractice insurance rates will skyrocket to the point of bankruptcy, or you will be dropped entirely.
think about the gravity of that. You are a doctor. You have hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical school debt. You have spent over a decade in grueling, specialized training, working 80-hour weeks. Your entire identity is wrapped up in healing people.
It's your whole life.
And one single anonymous complaint channeled through a rigged sham peer review by an angry hospital administrator can permanently, irreversibly end your ability to ever work in your chosen profession again.
The psychological toll is staggering. The documents note the ultimate, darkest tragedy of this system. Several whistleblowing doctors have tragically died by suicide while trapped in these processes, specifically while placed in PHPs.
PHPS, Physician Health Programs. Tell me about those.
This is another mechanism of control. Originally, PHPs were established with good intentions to help doctors struggling with genuine substance abuse or severe mental health issues.
Which makes sense.
But increasingly, administrators use them coercively against whistleblowers. If a doctor complains about patient safety, the administration might label them as disruptive or claim they have behavioral issues. The hospital then mandates that the doctor enter a PHP for evaluation. The doctor is forced to pay out of pocket, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, for a psychiatric evaluation at a facility chosen by the PHP.
And if they refuse?
If the doctor refuses or fights the diagnosis, their medical license is immediately suspended. They are trapped in a coercive loop where their sanity is weaponized against them. The fear of the NPDB and the PHP system is so profound that it forces thousands of doctors into terrified silence.
But here is where we find the most vexing, infuriating contrast in our entire deep dive.
Oh, this part is wild.
The hospital system is incredibly efficient, almost surgical, at destroying whistleblowers who try to save patients. But that same system is completely, bafflingly inept at stopping actual, literal monsters. Let's compare the fate of the whistleblowers with the story of Dr. Death.
Dr. Christopher Dunch. He was a neurosurgeon operating in Texas, and his case is a masterclass in institutional cowardice.
He was a butcher.
He was. Dr. Dunch had documented severe substance abuse issues. More importantly, he egregiously lacked basic surgical skills. Over the course of a few years, he literally maimed, paralyzed, and killed multiple patients on his operating table.
But how did the hospitals handle him? Did they subject him to a brutal sham peer review? Did they ruin his life?
No. They actively protected him. They did not report him to the NPDB.
Wait, really? How did they avoid reporting him?
When they realized he was paralyzing people, they struck a deal. They let him quietly resign his privileges before the mandatory 30-day suspension threshold that would have triggered an NPDB report.
Unbelievable.
They even gave him clean letters of reference so he could just move down the street, get hired at the next hospital, and keep cutting people open.
Why would they do that?
The hospital administrators were more afraid of Dunch filing a wrongful termination lawsuit against them and more afraid of the bad PR of admitting to their shareholders that they hired an incompetent surgeon than they were of him killing patients.
So the institution's primary instinct was self-preservation. They protected the hospital by passing the bad doctor along to the next victim.
Exactly. Now, I want you to contrast the kid-glove treatment of Dr. Death with the absolute nightmare inflicted on Ann Mitchell and Vicky Galley. They are widely known as the Winkler County nurses.
This story is mind-blowing. Mitchell and Galley were veteran nurses at a rural hospital in Texas. They were working under a physician named Dr. Rolando Arafales.
And Dr. Arafales was doing things that sound medieval. He was literally taking the rubber tips off of medical scissors and stitching them onto patients' crushed fingers.
What? That is insane.
He was performing complex skin grafts in the emergency room without being credentialed to do so. He was bypassing modern pharmaceuticals and pushing untested herbal remedies on vulnerable patients. He was a walking, breathing malpractice suit.
So Mitchell and Galley were deeply ethical professionals. They saw patients being mutilated, so they did exactly what the system tells you to do.
All right. They gathered the clinical evidence and submitted an anonymous, formal complaint to the Texas Medical Board, meticulously outlining 9 specific cases of grossly unsafe care by Dr. Arafales.
And what was the institutional response to these heroes?
The sheriff of Winkler County, who, by the way, happened to be a former patient, a business associate, and a personal friend of Dr. Arafales, decided to intervene.
Of course he did.
The sheriff used his law enforcement powers to get search warrants. He seized the hospital computers, tracked the IP addresses, and found the original file of the anonymous letter on Mitchell's computer.
The hospital immediately fired both nurses.
But being fired wasn't enough. The sheriff actually arrested them and had them criminally charged with a 3rd-degree felony for misuse of official information.
These 2 nurses were facing up to 10 years in a state penitentiary for blowing the whistle on a doctor who was stitching rubber to human flesh.
It is the ultimate perversion of justice. Mitchell bravely refused a plea deal and had to stand trial. She was eventually acquitted by a jury in less than an hour, and the massive public outrage eventually led to Dr. Arafales and the sheriff facing jail time themselves.
Thank goodness.
But look at the deeply ingrained institutional psychology at play here. When a hospital administration faces a horrific, incompetent doctor like Dunch, they fear the financial loss, the bad PR, and the messy lawsuits.
But when they face a whistleblower like Mitchell, the calculus completely changes.
A whistleblower threatens the entire financial, legal, and administrative structure of the hospital. They expose the rot in the floorboards. Therefore, to the bureaucratic mind, the whistleblower is treated as the ultimate enemy, an existential threat far worse than the incompetent doctor.
Okay, my blood is officially boiling at this point. If the local hospital administrators are acting this way, if they are actively protecting the bad doctors and legally destroying the good ones, why don't the ultimate regulators step in?
You'd think they would.
Where is the government? Where are the national medical councils that are supposed to oversee all of this?
That brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. We have to look at how the regulators themselves are neutralized, a concept known academically as regulatory capture.
Let's go back to Dr. Srivatsa in the UK to illustrate this. He has his 70 documented cases. He realizes his local primary care trust is entirely corrupt and actively trying to ruin him.
So he goes over their heads.
Right. He takes his massive dossier of evidence to the ultimate authorities, the General Medical Council, the GMC, which licenses all doctors in the UK, and the British Medical Association, the BMA, the Powerful Doctors Union.
He begs them for help against what he explicitly calls the quackery of unlicensed, untrained practice. He literally writes to them saying, public safety is a grave risk.
And the response he receives is incredibly revealing. We have the actual correspondence from the GMC in our documentation. The ultimate regulatory watchdog wrote back to him saying, essentially, we recognize your difficulties, but the GMC is unable to advise or intervene.
They completely washed their hands of it. They claimed it was a local employment dispute, blatantly ignoring the 70 cases of patient harm.
It gets even worse. Instead of investigating the clinics, the government itself stepped in to protect the system. The Secretary of State for Health actually pushed through legal changes.
But not to protect whistleblowers like Dr. Srivatsa.
No. To protect the nurses working in these pilot programs from legal threats and patient compensation claims, the government literally changed the law to shield this cheaper, unqualified labor force from the legal consequences of their own medical errors.
Unbelievable.
Srivatsa was so outraged, he ended up personally suing the Secretary of State for Health to try and stop it, and the sheer cost of the legal battle bankrupted him.
What Dr. Srivatsa experienced is the textbook, devastating reality of regulatory capture. We have a fascinating academic paper here from researchers at the University of York, which analyzes regulatory capture by looking at the infamous Vioxx scandal in the United States.
Oh, Vioxx, that was a huge scandal.
Massive. Vioxx was a blockbuster painkiller, a COX-2 inhibitor, aggressively marketed as a miracle drug for arthritis that wouldn't cause stomach bleeding. It was fully approved by the FDA regulators. It stayed on the market for years, generating billions in profit before it was finally pulled.
And why was it pulled?
Because it caused an estimated 88,000 to 140,000 severe heart attacks in the U.S. alone.
So, what is regulatory capture exactly? How does an agency tasked with protecting the public let a drug that causes 100,000 heart attacks stay on the market?
In simple structural terms, regulatory capture occurs when a regulatory agency, created specifically to act in the public interest, is co-opted. Instead of protecting the public, the agency's decisions, rules, and actions consistently advance the commercial, political, or financial concerns of the special interest groups that dominate the industry it is supposed to be regulating.
A regulator effectively becomes the puppet of the regulated.
Exactly. And what's brilliant about the York University research is that they break down how this actually happens in the real world. Because we watch movies and we think regulatory capture is a guy from a pharmaceutical company meeting a government regulator in a dark underground parking garage and handing over a briefcase full of unmarked bills.
Right, the cartoon bribe.
But the reality is much more subtle and much more dangerous. The researchers outline 3 specific mechanisms of capture. First, the revolving door.
The revolving door is what economists call the rational choice model. Regulators working for the government know that their civil service salary is a tiny fraction of what they could make in the private sector.
So, over time, they consciously or unconsciously begin making regulatory decisions that are highly favorable to massive pharmaceutical companies or corporate hospital conglomerates.
Why?
Because they know that when they eventually leave public service, there is a very lucrative 7-figure executive or consulting job waiting for them at the exact same companies they were just regulating. The regulator acts as an ally to secure their own future.
The second mechanism is information overload. The researchers refer to this as bounded rationality. Think about the mechanics of getting a drug approved.
Regulatory agencies are chronically underfunded and severely understaffed. A pharmaceutical company, on the other hand, commands billions of dollars in resources.
Right.
When that company wants a new drug approved, they don't just send over a summary. They flood the regulatory agency with millions of pages of complex data, convoluted clinical trial results, and highly technical, aggressive legal arguments.
Just drowning them in paperwork.
Exactly. The government regulators simply do not have the cognitive capacity, the time, or the manpower to effectively process, replicate, or challenge all that information. They are buried under a mountain of paper until they are forced to rely on the pharmaceutical company's own summaries. The regulator is paralyzed by data and eventually just stamps approved.
And the third mechanism, which I honestly find the most insidious of all, is cultural capture.
Cultural capture is entirely sociological. The high-level people working at the regulatory agencies and the executives working at the pharmaceutical companies or the top hospital boards often come from the exact same socioeconomic backgrounds.
They went to the same elite medical schools, they sit on the same boards.
They attend the same prestigious, exclusive medical conferences in Geneva or Aspen. They share the same scientific norms and social networks.
So they're friends.
Over time, the regulator begins to naturally adopt the worldview of the industry. They don't need to be bribed. They simply start to implicitly believe that what is good for the pharmaceutical industry or what is good for hospital efficiency is inherently good for the public.
The public becomes an abstract concept while the industry lobbyist becomes a trusted peer.
Exactly.
So let's bring this all the way back to the beginning. Think about the last time you went to a walk-in clinic and felt like the practitioner was just staring at a tablet, asking you a rigid set of questions instead of actually looking at you.
Yeah.
That tablet, that lack of eye contact, is the direct downstream result of everything we've just discussed. When Dr. Srivatsa was screaming for help, he wasn't just fighting a couple of disgruntled coworkers making up complaints.
It wasn't just fighting a vindictive HR department either.
No, he was fighting a completely, thoroughly captured culture, a massive system where the regulators, the politicians, and the administrators had all culturally and structurally aligned to prioritize the financial efficiency and the legal protection of the system over the safety of the individual patient.
Srivatsa was a purist. The system demanded cheap, automated, protocol-driven care to process massive numbers of patients. Srivatsa demanded expensive, highly customized, time-consuming clinical excellence.
He was a massive glitch in their perfectly designed, highly profitable matrix.
And the system simply did what systems are programmed to do. It ruthlessly purged the glitch.
It's a remarkably heavy realization. We started this deep dive talking about the comforting clarity of an X-ray. A broken bone is a broken bone. But what we've uncovered is a medical ecosystem where the bones of the institution itself are fundamentally shattered.
And the people wielding the power, the administrators, the regulators, the executives, are actively, aggressively refusing to look at the film. They will destroy anyone who points out the fracture.
It is a profound, continuing tragedy. Doctors like Dr. Srivatsa, Dr. Matu, Dr. Day, and Dr. Pittman took a solemn oath to do no harm. They spent the best years of their lives learning how to heal the human body.
And when they courageously tried to uphold that oath against a rising, unstoppable tide of cookbook medicine and administrative overreach, they were financially, professionally, and psychologically ruined.
Their meticulous clinical notes were weaponized against them. Their character was assassinated through sham peer reviews and fabricated complaints. Their lifelong careers were brutally extinguished.
And we have to connect this directly back to you, the listener, because it's so easy to dismiss this as just internal hospital politics or bureaucratic drama.
But it's not.
No. When a medical system systematically crushes its most honest, rigorous voices, when it replaces brilliant clinical intuition with a government-mandated SAT checklist, when it forces terrified doctors to practice defensive medicine just to survive a sham peer review, it is you, the patient in the waiting room, who ultimately pays the absolute highest price.
You are the one who gets referred to a speech therapist when you actually have a severe endocrine tumor. You are the one whose child gets placed on iron tablets for 2 years instead of getting a life-saving kidney ultrasound.
The forced silencing of the medical whistleblower is a direct, critical threat to your health and public safety. Until society demands the creation of truly independent bodies to protect these doctors' bodies, completely immune from the financial influence of hospital HR departments, free from the threat of the NPDB, and separated from culturally captured regulators, the standard of care will continue to be dictated by liability, compliance, and profit, not by the art of healing.
We have to leave the deep dive there for today, but I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Something that builds on everything we've just discussed, but points directly toward our immediate future. Right now, human doctors are being utterly crushed by bureaucratic protocols. They are exhausted by mindless administrative coding. They are terrified of retaliatory complaints and sham peer reviews.
It is a system absolutely ripe for massive technological disruption.
Exactly. So, what happens when artificial intelligence fully enters the examination room? It is already starting. Will AI become the ultimate, unfeeling enforcer of cookbook medicine, a cold machine that perfectly, blindly follows the bureaucratic protocols and checklists without ever looking up to see the patient's humanity?
Or will AI become the ultimate whistleblower?
Right. An entity that is completely immune to hospital politics, that literally cannot be fired by a sham peer review, and that can instantly process 70 medical errors across a massive hospital database without any fear of human retaliation.
It is arguably the next great frontier of medical ethics and patient safety.
Keep questioning the systems around you. Keep fiercely advocating for your own health and the health of your loved ones. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.